they need.
Ensuring that Americans have affordable credit. That was one reason banks like Chase got billions in taxpayer bailout money. Now this taxpayer is making a request.
I'd like Chase to honor what our agreement has been all along.
Now, well, two members of Congress, they're trying to help. Barney Frank and Carolyn Maloney have introduced a new bill that would make those credit card rules go into effect on December 1st instead of in late February. But even if that passes, and the bill is not on the calendar for a vote, but if it did pass, that would still give the credit card companies another 2 months to keep raising rates and doubling payments. And that's little solace for Chuck and Jean Lane. Wolf.
Little solace indeed, Jessica. Thanks for that report. In other matters involving your money, the government watchdog who keeps an eye on the bank bailout program is out with a brand new report. And it says in part that federal officials were not all that honest about the health of the first big bailouts to 9 financial firms. Neil Barofsky is the bailout special inspector general. He was appointed by President Bush back in last November after his office was created by the law establishing the $700 billion federal bailout program known as TARP. Mr. Barofsky is here with us in the Situation Room. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
You say the federal government, at least some officials, misled the American people about the health of some of these banks. Were they actually lying to us?
I wouldn't go so far as to say lying, but what they did say when they said the first 9 banks were healthy and that this infusion of capital was going to help them lend, they didn't necessarily think that they were, in fact, healthy. Treasury had...
Why wouldn't they tell us the truth? Instead of, because I remember at the time they said, well, these are healthy banks, but we're just going to make sure they take some of this money so that some of the non-healthy banks would feel more comfortable.
I think it was a lack of transparency and forthrightness in the marketing of the program. The point was, what was going through their mind was the importance of having a big systemic support for these financial institutions. They were worried, as Chairman Bernanke told us, there was a panic about what was going to happen. But rather than saying that we're doing this to support these financial institutions to return confidence to the system, they talked about the health, and that was unfortunate because it's not what they believed to be true at the time.
You say they misled. It sounds to me like they were lying. Name some names. Who's responsible for misleading us about these 9 financial institutions?
Well, former Secretary Paulson put out a press release where he emphasized the health of the financial institutions, repeatedly made reference to it, and there was also a press release that was signed by or put out by Chairman Bear and Chairman Bernanke as well.
But Bernanke's still the chairman of the Federal Reserve, but Chairman Bear is still around as well, right?
Yes.
And did you consult, did you talk to them? Did you ask them why they did this?
No, we did talk to Chairman Bernanke about, what his thoughts are and what was going on at the time. And he did have concerns about the stress on these institutions, and he did have concerns about whether they could survive.
You mean if he would have told us the truth about the nature of these institutions, the situation would have been even more worse? It could have created more panic out there? Is that what you're saying?
That may have been what was their concerns were. It may have just been sloppiness. We don't really know the why. But what we do know is that there was a lack of transparency and care that
Does it ever make sense, from your perspective, for these officials, these people in power, to mislead us for the greater good, shall we say, because if they tell us the truth, it'll cause panic and disaster?
I don't think so, because I think whatever short-term gain there may be, there's a long-term harm. If people lose confidence in their government, ultimately when we have these crises, it's the government's credibility that is one of its most important assets, and you lose that long-term if you're not honest with the American people.
I know you're not investigating the current situation, but you get the sense, and you obviously know a great deal about this, that the new Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner and others, they're telling us the truth, what's going on?
We certainly push for that level of transparency, and I think that we certainly have seen no indications that they have not, but it's really a question of being transparent. So, as an example, when we hear about how TARP may turn a profit or those types of suggestions, we need to take a hard look at those facts, because the bottom line is there's strong indications that they won't.
Well, some of these financial institutions have returned the TARP money with interest, right?
That's correct.
Like Goldman Sachs.
Yes.
But others have not.
Others have not. Some 35 banks have missed their regular dividend payments.
How much is this going to wind up costing all of us, the taxpayers? Because presumably we're never going to get a lot of that money back.
It's impossible to know precisely because the program is still rolling out. But we know that we're not going to get $50 billion back as part of the mortgage modification program. We know we're not going to get, or it's very unlikely we're going to get dollar for dollar. We're going to lose probably tens of billions in the auto bailouts. AIG and Citi are big question marks. And some of these banks that we've given money are teetering on the edge of bankruptcy.
What's the most
CIT.
important lesson you learned from this investigation that you conducted?
Transparency. Be honest with the American people. Tell them the truth about what you're doing and why you're doing it. It's the best way to protect credibility.
We can handle the truth. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Thanks very much, Mr. Barofsky, for this report, and thanks for coming in.